Okay, class, lecture number 26. This is it. Well, not quite, because we have a review. That review video is going to take place after this one, and then we have to have a review for the final examination, too. So, actually, you'll be seeing me a couple more times. Alrighty, this is our last official lecture. Last time we were together, we talked about the end of the Vietnam War. Vietnamization, that's training of the ARVN to actually take care of their own selves, to defend their own country. And we also mentioned that about Cambodia, the incursion that took place on April 30th. And in 1970, I don't know why President Nixon ordered that, but anyway, it just created havoc across our country, particularly in the university campuses there. And definitely that of Kent State. You know what happened at Kent State on the 4th of May, 1970. We had a number of students that were shot, and 4 of them were killed. We went through the presidential election in 1972, and Richard Nixon won that election in a landslide. It was one of the worst trouncings in a presidential election that we have had in the history of our country. And we also talked about Watergate. We probably didn't spend as much time as we could have on that subject. Long subject, it's a very controversial subject here. But nonetheless, here we'll find that Richard Nixon will be forced to resign. This was somewhat concurrent with the resignation of the Vice President, Spiro Agnew. And Gerald Ford became the president. He was not elected president. He just became the president. And in 1976 presidential election, Gerald Ford's popularity had dropped. He was still a popular individual, but the press was very, very brutal to him. He was on the golf course, and he hit a golf ball, and the golf ball hit another individual. Gerald Ford was coming down the steps, if you will, to Air Force One, and he slipped. And, of course, the press just made it look like he was just an absolute klutz with everything that he did. And Jimmy Carter will win that presidential election in 1976. And we talked about some of the contributions of Jimmy Carter, which were not very many. We did have the Camp David Accord, which I admire him very much for accomplishing that. A peace agreement between Egypt Anwar Sadat, and Israel Menachem Begin. And that peace has held since that time. All right, we mentioned that about the Iranian hostage situation. It took place in 1979, a very embarrassing situation for us. And when I lived through that, and I just could not believe what was unfolding before the eyes of the American public. And we basically did nothing, honestly. All right, then Ronald Reagan was elected president in 1980, and a great communicator. A popular individual, had a lot of political enemies, but a popular individual. So anyway, let's move on here. That's where we left off, and I want to tell you about something else that's going to occur here. You know, on August 13th, in 1961, the Berlin Wall was constructed, and it will take some time to get the full 27 miles of concrete in place there. But anyway, strangely enough here, we're going to see the Berlin Wall is actually going to crumble. This will take place on the 9th of November in can't even remember the date, 1989. All right, so let's go back here to our notes here. 9th of November in 1989, and the Berlin Wall, did I write down 87 here? And Berlin Wall will come down. It's been up for 28 years, by the way. Let me get my lighting adjusted properly here. That was 1989. It's not 1987 as I wrote it there. Caught me off guard with that. How did this take place? Many, many reasons behind this. I'll get into some of those in just a few minutes here, but I want to share some visuals with you. This is on that date here, or close to thereof, where we're going to see the beginnings of the demolishing. You can see a man, if you look carefully there, he has a sledgehammer. It looks like a coal chisel or something. He's trying to break down the wall. Let's see if I have some other photographs here of this. Now, this is the way the wall looked during those times here before it actually was demolished. Notice all the graffiti that's present on there. This is what the wall looks like today, and I think I told you at an earlier time, we only have about 2 blocks, about maybe 200 yards of the wall that are still in existence. You can go on the other side of it. You can't climb on that because they have wiring that prevents you from getting close to the wall. But that's just left there for symbolic purposes here, and I think this photograph is taken from the eastern side, if I remember right. And let me show you the way the wall looked like. This is at Brandenburg Gate, and that's what it looked like when the wall was still present there. Notice there they called it the Brandenburger Tor, and that means like gate, and anyway, we'll just call it that. This is the same area where the photos, if you look at the photographs, if I get my photographs positioned properly, you can see with one with a wall in place, and then we see the other one here where the wall is not there. Now today when you go there, let me get this right, if you go there, this gate right here is open. In fact, all of these portals right here are open. You can walk through any of those. Back in the times of the Kaisers, and even earlier than that, this gate was always just reserved for the royalty, for the nobility, and common people could not go through there. So if you're going through there, you can kind of think of yourself as being a king or a Kaiser or an emperor or something on that order. All right, let's see what other photographs I have here. And here is another one. This is one that was taken during the times in which the wall was present. Here's a little chunk of the wall, by the way. This is the wall here. You can see the razor concertina wire that's up here. We go a little bit behind here where the grassy area is. That's a minefield. And if we go even further back here in this direction, you can even see another wall. So for you to escape, this meant you had to cross two walls of minefield along with machine gun nests that are machine gun turrets that are present there too. Okay, let's see what else I have for you. Here's a chunk of the wall. And here's another little chunk of the wall. You can buy these. In fact, I have a letter of authenticity, if you can believe this. But there it is. It's a certificate showing you that's an original piece of the wall. I spent €6.50 for that. That'd be the equivalent of about, I don't know, maybe $7 for that little chunk of concrete. I can only imagine that the proprietor of the establishment that I bought this from probably had somebody outside, with a can of spray paint and busting up concrete blocks and taking advantage of individuals like myself. But that's okay. As long as I believe it's a chunk of the Berlin Wall, then I'm happy with that. All right, so anyway, go to Berlin, get yourself a piece of the rock, if you will. All right, now, why did this take place? Well, I don't know. I lived through this, and I'm still not really sure about this. I do know that Solidarity and Lech Walesa had something to do with this and softening the relationship of this iron fist of the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Communist Party leader was an individual by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev. And I want you to know that. You've got to know Mikhail Gorbachev. But he established a couple of policies. One of these policies was known as Glasnost, and the other policy was called Perestroika. And I want you to know both of those now. Now, what Glasnost is, this is to eliminate oppression. That's that strong iron fist, the thumb of oppression on the Soviet people and also the people in the Eastern Bloc countries there, the communist countries that the Soviet Union had control of. And the other policy here was one which was called Perestroika. And Perestroika was private trade. It is private trade. This means it's a move towards capitalism. And I'll show you a likeness here of Mikhail Gorbachev. He is the one that has his hands up. He had a port wine stain, which is on his forehead. You can see part of it right there, purple port wine stain. And a person that is to his right, which is where my fingers are right here, that is a man by the name of Boris Yeltsin. Now, Boris Yeltsin would be the president of the Russian Federation after we had the collapse of the Soviet Union. You need to recognize both of those names there. Boris Yeltsin, I think I wrote it for you, and I'll get to that in just a second. So let's go back to our camera right here. But with the establishment of Glasnost, establishment of Perestroika, it made it more easy for strikes to take place, new elections were held, communists were voted out of power, and pro-capitalists were voted, and pro-democracy individuals were voted into power here. So it was a crazy, crazy situation. It looks like I did not write that name down, Boris Yeltsin. So it's B-O-R-I-S, and it's Y-E-L-T-S-I-N. Y-E-L-T-S-I-N, Boris Yeltsin. He was the president of the Russian Federation. All right, some other events that are going to take place before we get into our presidential elections, and most of our lecture will deal with presidential elections, all the way from 1884 until 2020. All right, 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. He is a black African. In South Africa, you had black Africans, white Africans, but he was a black man, and he was released from prison after 27 years of imprisonment, and would later become president of South Africa, and he worked hard in eliminating the policies there of discrimination. It is referred to as apartheid. All right, so let's move on, see what else is going to take place in the presidential election of 1988. And interesting presidential election. And the man that's going to get the Republican nomination is George Herbert Walker Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush. His running mate was Dan Quayle, Danforth Quayle from Indiana. And Dan Quayle made a spelling error. And he misspelled potato. It was an easy mistake, misspelled potato. And you betcha you know what the liberal left-wing press did about that, and they portrayed Dan Quayle as being just an imbecile, as a person who doesn't even know how to spell. And for the Democrats went with their candidate, Michael Dukakis. His running mate was Lloyd Bentsen, by the way. And we also had another candidate there, who was Senator Gary Hart, senator from Colorado, and Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson had his Rainbow Express. That was a Rainbow Coalition, Rainbow Express. That'd be one of your test questions, by the way. And it was a motorcade, these large buses, and I actually saw it. I saw it passing near Atlanta, Georgia. And anyway, so let me show you the Democratic hopefuls anyway. And we have right here in the center here. Yeah, oops, I've got this presidential election wrong. That is not Michael Dukakis right there. And this election here, this is Fritz Mondale, and this one is Geraldine Ferraro. And we had Gary Hart, who was president here, and we also had Jesse Jackson, who was president right there. All righty, so anyway, those were our candidates there. And this was the 84 presidential election. I'm sorry about that. And I don't know why I wasn't very careful with that. And anyway, let me tell you about a career ender, however. And it was revealed, and actually press did this. The press revealed that Senator Gary Hart was involved in an illicit sexual affair with an aspiring young aspiring young model. Her name was Donna Rice. And of course, he's a married man, by the way, married man. And here he is right there. I'm working backwards. And he denied that fact. And as it turned out, the press reported published a photograph of Senator Gary Hart along with this lady, Donna Rice. So that was a career ender for him, and he will be out. But anyway, that was the 84 presidential election. Now I want to move on here to the 88 presidential election with Michael Dukakis there. And for George Herbert Walker Bush, he ran a very, very good campaign. He portrayed Dukakis as being weak on crime, and in fact, Dukakis was known for, or suspected anyway, of releasing hardened criminals from prison. And what the Republican campaign used for this, they would take these mean, rough-looking convicts, or at least they looked like convicts anyway, and you would see them walking in lockstep, marching in lockstep into prison, and the prison door was a turnstile. And so as soon as you would walk into the prison, you would just follow the turnstile around, and you would be released from prison. So, nonetheless, there it worked very effectively here, and we'll see the election results. George Herbert Walker Bush, 54%, and Michael Dukakis here was 46%. You can see the electoral vote. Did I write it down here? I don't even see that. Yeah, I did. 426 and to 112. All right, so anyway, let's move on. Now, we're likewise going to see that an event's going to take place here in Panama. Now, this is under George Herbert Walker Bush, and at that time, Panama had a corrupt dictator. His name was Manuel Noriega. And people there referred to him as a pineapple, in which you could be executed, for calling him the pineapple. He had a severe acne scarring, and it just disfigured his face a little bit. But anyway, he was involved in a great number of corruption matters here, laundering of money, drug sales, and in the United States initiated Operation Just Cause in December of 1989, and which we went in and we actually took control of Panama. We also arrested here at Manuel Noriega. And it's too long of a story for me to tell you about this. He spent time in the United States and incarcerated there. Later went to France and was incarcerated there. And just a couple of years ago, he was released back to the prison in Panama, and he subsequently died there. All right, so let me tell you about another event that's going to occur here on the 2nd of August, 1990. Saddam Hussein, who was the leader, the dictator, if you will, of Iraq, ordered Iraqi forces into tiny Kuwait. Kuwait's a very wealthy nation, at least for the sheikhs that are present there. It's an oil nation. It's part of OPEC. It's very wealthy. It honestly is. And anyway, Saddam Hussein took that tiny country over, and it had all the appearances that Saudi Arabia would be next on the list for Iraq to attack. All right, so nevertheless here, George Herbert Walker Bush brought together a coalition, and this is unbelievable. We even had Islamic nations involved in this, but it was a coalition of 29 nations and the objective was to move Iraq out of Kuwait, and that's all it was. And so we went through the buildup before the actual military action, which we call Desert Shield, and this will be followed by Desert Storm. That's the actual military action itself here. The United States put forth 500,000 men. I did not go. I was in the Army Reserve at that time, but a number of my friends went. A lot of members of the National Guard, local National Guard went. We also had with this 200,000 coalition troops, so it was a force of 700,000 in this buildup of Desert Shield and Desert Storm, all building up in Saudi Arabia. That's where they were going to build up. All right, we began the air offensive, and in January 1991, you can see the date there, and we're going to begin the ground offensive on the 23rd of February 1991, and most of us Americans sitting at home anyway, we were watching every minute of this. The American commander and commander of the coalition troops was an individual by the name of Norman Schwarzkopf. He was a Vietnam veteran, graduate of West Point, a very talented general officer. Here's a likeness from him. This came from a pro set. It's like football cards, except it was cards that came out during that time. It was showing all sorts of military vehicles, military commanders there. And there's Norman Schwarzkopf. They refer to him as Stormin' Norman. And in fact, I took this photograph at West Point a couple of years ago, and that's the burial site there of Norman Schwarzkopf. It was indeed an honor, I felt, for me just to be standing there looking at his grave. Not very far from him is the grave site there of William Westmoreland, the American commander in Vietnam. So I got both of those, Schwarzkopf and Westmoreland. All right, so anyway, that's Norman Schwarzkopf there. And the action lasted 100 hours. That was it. It was precisely 100 hours, before President Bush called this off. And a complete success with this, U.S. losses at that time. And in 100 hours, we had 141 losses. The Iraqi losses, well, I just don't know, as a matter of fact. It is thought that at least 100,000, but Stormin' Norman would not allow any body counts. I told you about the tragedy of the body counts that took place in Vietnam, so no body counts were kept. And we can only estimate, that the Iraqi army, the Iraqi Republican Guards, lost about 100,000. Here's a political cartoon I preserved from that period of time, and that is a F-14 Tomcat, and it's flying down upon a Iraqi soldier who's on a camel, and the caption here says, "I'd fly 10,000 miles to smoke a camel." Well, by golly, we smoked some camels, I am telling you, my friends. All righty, now, let me show you how the campaign went here. This is the best map I can find for you good folks here. All right, but let me get you oriented to this. Here's the Persian Gulf that's present here. This is Iran. Here is Iraq. Iraq is in the red. And tiny Kuwait in the yellow. This is tiny Kuwait here. So what the Republican Guards did, Saddam Hussein's army, they had positioned themselves up on the Kuwaiti border. I guess this was anticipation of attacking Saudi Arabia. And so what we did, what Norman Schwarzkopf did, we provided a holding action up here in the Persian Gulf itself, and we deployed most of the coalition troops and Marines and the American troops right here on the opposite side of the Kuwaiti border with Saudi Arabia. And that's where we were. But what Norman Schwarzkopf did, he conducted a, shall we say, an alley-oop, an end run. And where we made our major thrust was over in this area, and we came in here in this fashion here. I don't know if you can see this very well, and came in right behind the Iraqi army, and we cut off their retreat. Now, this was in a combination with airstrikes coming through here, ground forces coming through here, and it was just a it was just a cakewalk. It was just a duck shoot, if you will, here. So anyway, so we came out very victorious with this, and I will tell you, the number one hero in America at that time was the President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush. So I want to show you something, and Walker College teaching at that time, and we had what was called Desert Storm Support Day. I've never seen anything like it. This is a program that was preserved from that period. You can read the date there. It says February 27th, I believe, in 1991. I've never seen anything like it. Well, I'll just keep that here. I've never seen anything like this. Our campus, and I'm talking about the Jasper campus, was full of students. There must have been 1,500 students that were there, people from the city, just citizens from Jasper and from the county, all gathered outside the Jesse Student Center, by the college gym, by the way, and speaker stands set up there, everybody waving American flags, singing patriotic songs. Patriotic speeches were made. I have never seen anything like that in my years in this country, honestly, here. And of course, the enthusiasm for that died away. It didn't last very long, and it was just back to business as usual. Do you think we would have that kind of enthusiasm today? No, you know we would not. All right, so anyway. So, George Herbert Walker Bush, most powerful man, or I should say the most popular man in America at that time. Well, that took place in 1991. And now we got a presidential election, but this presidential election is a year and a half away. And so it was too long, and the popularity of George Bush began to sink. All right, so let's move on into our presidential election of 1992. And George Herbert Walker Bush and Dan Quayle will get the Republican nomination. And we're going to find another individual. And before I do that, I don't want to get myself too far along here. So I'm not quite going into the presidential election 1992. I want to show you a likeness here of George Herbert Walker Bush. I like that guy. I really did. I thought he was sincere. Here's another likeness here of George Herbert Walker Bush. Read my lips. No new taxes. And that's what he promised the American people. Okay, so let's go back to our election here. 1992, and the Democrats went with an interesting individual. He'd been a 5-term governor of Arkansas, liked to play saxophone, liked cigars too, by the way. I probably shouldn't have mentioned that. And crazily enough, we're going to see another candidate, an independent party candidate by the name of Ross Perot. Squeaky little voice, very annoying. He was a Texas billionaire, by the way. He had a lot of money. And so we had 3 candidates, and he was popular. Ross Perot was popular. And I can remember with my friends, my running buddies at that time, literally running buddies, and several of them, they were leaning in the direction of Ross Perot. And I tried to caution them. I said, you're throwing your vote away, If you don't go for George Bush, you don't go for Bill Clinton, you're wasting your vote. And as usual, nobody listened to me. And we'll take a look at the election result here. And George Herbert Walker Bush picked up 38% of the vote and 168 electoral college ballots. And Bill Clinton, William Jefferson Clinton, his running mate, by the way, was Al Gore, 43%. And 370 electoral votes. And Ross Perot ran an amazing, really strong race, 19%. But I'm telling you, some historians will argue that Ross Perot did not influence that presidential election of 1992. But I'm going to tell you, my friends, they are wrong. Because most of the Perot supporters, they would not have gone with Bill Clinton. They would have gone with Bush. So I'm convinced that this was a determining factor in who won that presidential election in 1992. But we're going to find Bill Clinton wins that presidential election. His wife was Hillary Rodham Clinton. There's Bill Clinton. I miss this guy. There's always something exciting taking place under Bill Clinton. It may not have been completely appropriate, but it was always something that was fun and exciting with that. All right, William Jefferson Clinton, if you ever get a chance to meet him or see him in public, he's quite a showman. He really is. You will like him. I did not vote for him, but every time I saw Bill Clinton, I was always he's a funny guy. He really is. Okay, so let's move on here. So William Jefferson Clinton is now the president. All right, just a few things that were taking place in this time. 1993, we got involved in a little military action here in Somalia, at Mogadishu. Some of you may have seen the movie Black Hawk Down. That deals with that. And 1994 in Bosnia, United States forces, we got ourselves engaged in that as a peacekeeping force and Operation Joint Endeavor. And we're still to a limited amount involved in that area. I had some of my friends that were sent into Bosnia, sent into those areas. All right, 1996 presidential election. Once again, Bill Clinton will seek re-election, and the Republicans will go with a person by the name of Bob Dole. He was a senator from Kansas. You don't see him too much now, but a couple of years ago he was one of the spokespeople, if you will, the advertisers for Viagra. I don't think I would want that job, but he did that anyway. Somebody's got to do it, I guess. And then Ross Perot, he threw his hat into the ring once again. So let's take a look at the election result. Bill Clinton, 49%. And 379 electoral votes. Bob Dole, 41%. Bob Dole, what they refer to him as. 41%, 159 electoral votes. Ross Perot, not quite as popular this time, only 8% of the popular vote. So who wins re-election in 1996? You know. All right, and that was Bill Clinton. Well, it was around this period of time that the news came out that Bill Clinton had some illicit sexual affairs. He's a married man. He married to Hillary Clinton. And he had affairs with Jennifer Flowers, and Kathleen Willey, and Paula Jones, and guess who else? Anybody recognize this lady? Monica Lewinsky. And, of course, Bill Clinton said, I wasn't involved in that. He said, she's a White House intern, but no, I'm a married man, and I would not get involved in that. Well, an investigation took place here, a Ken Starr investigation, to determine whether Bill Clinton was lying, and perjury, if you will. And anyway, and subsequently, we're going to find that impeachment charges are brought against Bill Clinton. This was largely on party lines. This was a Republican affair in doing this. And here's what we're going to have here. All right, now, you know, I told you this last semester that when an impeachment takes place, the impeachment indictment, the charges are presented in the House of Representatives. And then the actual trial takes place in the Senate. All right, so the charges against Bill Clinton were perjury, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. Perjury, of course, is that of lying. All right, and for the vote ended up for abuse of power, is just not guilty with that. And for the perjury charge, you can read in the numbers there, 228 to 206, and obstruction of justice, 221 to 212. Mostly on party lines. So it goes to the Senate. That's where the actual trial took place. We all watched this in my classroom. And I thought it was kangaroo court, you should have censored the president, something on that order. Abuse of power, obstruction of justice, perjury, yes, that did take place. There's no question about that. It requires 2/3 vote. It requires 67 votes to get a conviction. So you can see in the Senate on the perjury charge, 55 to 45, not even close. And for the obstruction of justice charge, it was 50-50, not even close. An embarrassment to Bill Clinton. He was the second president of the United States to be impeached, and it never should have taken place. All righty, so let's move on here. In the election of 2020, George Walker Bush, W is what they referred to him as, and he's a Republican nominee and ran against Al Gore. And Al Gore and Joe Lieberman. And anyway, and we had Dick Cheney for George Bush, by the way. I'm trying to read my writing there. You can see the election results, 47.9 for George Bush, 271 electoral votes, 48.48 for Al Gore. He won the popular vote, but he did not win the Electoral College. Electoral College was won by George Herbert Walker Bush. That decision, we had all sorts of a mess there trying to interpret the election results, particularly in Florida. And then, nonetheless, you're going to find that the Supreme Court will have to intervene with that and awarded the Florida ballots to George Walker Bush. You can imagine how the Democrats felt about that, and they were very, very unhappy with it. Of course, it felt like the election was stolen from them. Your likeness here, George W. Bush. All right, so anyway, there was a presidential election there of 2000. All right, so let's move on. Let's see what else we have here. It was during this time that we're going to have 9/11 to take place, and I don't want to go into that. We don't have time to do that. But as a result of that, in 2002, the United States military forces got ourselves involved in Afghanistan, and we got ourselves involved in 2003 in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was deposed, and he was later hanged. He honestly was hanged. Let's see here. What do I have here? And here's a photo there showing you Saddam Hussein. He was captured in a spider hole, by the way. Let's see if I have a likeness here. A couple more likenesses here. Saddam Hussein. There he is holding an AK-47, or maybe AKMS, I believe that's what it is. And let's see here. After weeks of incarceration, that's what Saddam Hussein appeared as. And there he is again. And anyway, he was hanged. I don't have a photograph of the hanging, and I would want to show that to you anyway. All right, so we still have forces here in Afghanistan, Iraq. As I'm currently speaking to you, there's promises from the President of the United States that these forces, U.S. forces, are going to be removed from that area. And by golly, I wish we were. We have no business being in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, places such as that. This individual's name is Steve Scott. And Steve Scott, he's colonel, by the way, but he was a close friend of mine. And in fact, he was my executive officer, and he was a lieutenant colonel when he was my executive officer. And we had shared the same unit, and we were very close with each other. We would run together at lunch. I ran many miles with this man, and I'd gotten out. I was out of the Army Reserves in 2001, just right before 9/11, and that was just coincidence. You know, my time was up. And he was promoted to colonel. He went to Iraq and was working out in a compound. That's my understanding anyway. Was just doing a physical activity, working out inside of an American compound. And a mortar shell went into the compound and took this man's life. And it's that hurt me very much. Okay, so let's move on here. 2004 presidential election, and for George Walker Bush and Dick Cheney, and they were running against John Kerry. All right, the election results: 51% for George Bush, 236 electoral votes, and for John Kerry and John Edwards, 48%. And I can't read my writing there. 220 something. I can't read my writing. I'm sorry. And so anyway, George Bush wins that presidential election there in 2004. All right, so let's move on here, class. In the 2008 presidential election, I'm trying to get this to focus a little bit better. 2008 presidential election, Barack Obama will run against John McCain and Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin, obviously female there, and she will be not our first vice presidential candidate, because Geraldine Ferraro was our first under Fritz Mondale. But Barack Obama will pick up 53% of the votes to, well, I can't read that either here. It's too smudged for my eyes anyway. And I'm sorry about that. And it looks like 364 electoral votes, and John McCain gets 174 electoral votes and 46% of the popular vote. All right, so that is Barack Obama. And I'm trying to find a likeness here. I do not have a presidential photo of Barack Obama. It's the best I can do. The company that produced those presidential photos went out of business, so I'll just have to show this one to you if I can get the light right, glaring off of my window there, and Barack Obama. Okay, next presidential election. So let's move on here. And finally, we'll move into the 2012 presidential election. Barack Obama will get the Democratic nomination, and Mitt Romney will get the Republican nomination. 51% for Barack Obama, 42% for, that's 47% for Mitt Romney, 332 electoral votes, and for Mitt Romney, 206 electoral votes. All right, so Barack Obama is elected for a second term in office. All right, 2016 presidential election, Hillary Clinton gets the Democratic nomination, and Donald J. Trump will get the Republican nomination. You can take a look at the results there. Hillary Clinton had 232 electoral votes and 48.2% of the popular vote. And for Donald Trump, 306 electoral votes, 46.1 in the popular vote, but it's electoral vote that counts with that. So Donald Trump is elected President of the United States. And I don't have a presidential photo of Donald Trump. Here he is, right there. All right, President of the United States. Okay, so let's move on here. And the current presidential election took place. I'm going to come back to Donald Trump in just a second, by the way. And the current presidential election, which took place in November the 3rd, 2020, it was against Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Kamala Harris, and we had Mike Pence, and for Donald Trump and Joe Biden, well, we really don't know. As I'm delivering this lecture to you right now, and I'm not going to give you the date here, but it has still not been determined who is the President of the United States. We'll just see how it goes. All right, now I need to address here about the impeachment of Donald Trump. This was another one of those witch trial type things. It took place December 2019, and the charges against the President, Donald Trump, was trying to coerce a Ukrainian president. In other words, that we would withhold money that would go to Ukraine if he didn't conduct an investigation on some wrongdoing. And as much of this wrongdoing came with the Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. And he was working for a gas company which was in Ukraine. He had no experience whatsoever with this, but he was being paid a fabulous amount of money. And it was actually Joe Biden that was doing the threatening, to withhold much money that the United States was going to give to the Ukraine. All right, but nonetheless, here it was largely Democrat. It was all Democrat, what it was. I don't spare a punch with that. And there were two charges: abuse of power and the obstruction of Congress. So you can take a look at the election results here, or not the election results. You can take a look at the vote here that took place in the House of Representatives. Remember, this is not the trial. That is not the trial. This is all on party lines. It is straight down party lines, Democrats and Republicans, and we get 236 that say that Donald Trump did abuse power, 147 no in the House of Representatives, obstruction of Congress, 229 to 198. All right, the trial went to the Senate, and it requires 67 votes to get a conviction there. Again, straight on party lines here, folks, with one exception with this. The abuse of power, there were 52 votes that were non-guilty and not guilty, and we had 48 that were guilty, straight down party lines. And on the obstruction of Congress, we had 58 non-guilty, 53 not guilty votes, and we had 47 guilty votes with that. So what we actually had on the abuse of power there, we had one Republican, that was Mitt Romney, that actually crossed sides and actually went with the Democrats on this. An embarrassing situation, both of those, and in fact all three of the impeachments that we have. And as I've told you good folks before, we have set a dangerous precedent. In the future, you mark my words, any time that we have a president that is not of the same political party as the House of Representatives, that party controls the House of Representatives, that person will be impeached. So the impeachment has lost its credibility here in our United States Constitution. All right, that's all I'm going to say for today here, folks. I've been at it for about 38 minutes here. You're going to have a review for your third examination that will follow this. It will be a separate video. Prepare yourself well for this now. You'll find that your final examination will most likely take place directly after, I'm talking about within a few days after your third examination. You may be a lucky class that has it extended 1 week beyond your third examination, but most of you have it very quickly. So stay up with your studies here. All right, thank you very much.